Welcome to the Hospitality Maverick podcast with me, Michael Tinkser. We are here to inspire leaders to create heart-centered and profitable businesses from the inside out, the kind that both employees and customers love and support. This episode is very different from the normal Hospitality Maverick podcast series. This was actually original a webinar organized by the lovely people over at Bizimply, who are the scheduling system that helps you save time and money. And they had an idea of bringing together their own Matt Coulthard and Rob Liddiard, the CEO and founder of Yapster, which are the internal messaging app that helps you get out to the frontline employees with the important messages you need to have and also connect with them. And then ourselves and me here at Hospitality Mavericks. And we found out there was a subject we needed to share with the world. And it was, in a way, a bit of a brutal subject, so we called it Face the Facts. And the Face the Facts is all about understanding where we are right now as an industry and why our model is broken. This pandemic has shown us a very clear sign that we have a broken model. We have a model that pre-pandemic always were very fragile and always were on the knife edge. And we discussed that in this podcast. How do we actually ask the right questions? Because we don't have the answer in this panel. How can we ask the right question and build organizations that become more robust, more agile, more relevant, and can actually survive whatever they're going to be met with over the coming decades? So how can we use this pandemic actually to create this kind of organization that thrives and survives no matter the conditions they're hit with? And I can tell you this conversation becomes very interesting, and there comes up some very clear advice on what we think could be a route forward. And I think there is some very good insights and thinking you can use as you are looking at your organization and business model and thinking, well, what can I do to become an organization that can stand against the next storm? So my suggestion is grab your notebook, your pen, your coffee, and your headphones and enjoy.
Hi everyone, my name is Matt Coulthard. I'm a solutions advisor from Bizimply. Prior to working for Bizimply, I worked for Costa for around 15 years, 10 and a half of which I spent with a franchise business. Did pretty much every role from barista up through management to operations. So my background is heavily led from that, and I use that knowledge and experience to advise our customers. Michael, Rob, I'm going to let you guys introduce yourselves because I'm sure you can do that best. So Michael, if you want to introduce yourself to everyone.
Yeah, I'm Michael, the founder of Hospitality Mavericks, born and raised into the industry that my mom and dad ran restaurants in the southern part of Denmark, a small group, not a brand as we know them today, mom and pop shop. And when I was 15, I was told by my mom I need to lead the family business, and I went to work for McDonald's for a number of years, more than 11 years, both in Denmark and the UK, and I ran a number of other operations as well. One of them is a cafe chain. We scale from 4 to 24 units at a point. And then the last 8 years been helping operators across Europe trying to build organizations that can outlive not only the leaders, but also many times the organization, and trying to get that blueprint right for an incredible organization that can actually maybe survive what we're seeing right now. And that's the interesting journey. How can you create businesses, as we're going to talk about today, that can survive things like a pandemic, which is new territory for everyone.
Fantastic. Thanks, Michael. And Rob?
Hi, everyone. So my name is Rob Liddiard. I'm one of the co-founders and the CEO at Yapster. Yapster is a mobile messaging platform that integrates with the best-in-class hospitality platforms. We're very proud to partner with Bizimply, so we share customers in common like Notes Coffee. We also work for brands like Cafe Nero and Marsden's and Wagamama and various others, and then also some retailers like Next and Summers and Vision Express. So we started the business 5 years ago because it became very clear that half the economy was running on WhatsApp because 80% of people working in frontline roles don't have a corporate email address, and even more so don't have corporate devices typically, or laptops. And so what effectively happened is those folks tended to use the personal smartphones that are now in everybody's pockets, and the consumer networks and messaging products that developed over recent years to self-assemble workplace communication networks to talk to one another locally, or often even at sort of area level. So Yapster is a company-controlled alternative that fills that space. So connecting to underlying business systems and then connecting colleagues to one another for one-to-one or group communications. So we're fascinated constantly by the types of messages that leaders are needing to flow through our system, or frontline colleagues are looking to push back to their peers or to leaders. And so it sort of echoes what Michael said earlier, that we're clearly living through unprecedented times, and we're seeing some amazing feats of leadership and innovation, technical and otherwise. And we're also, frankly, seeing, I guess, some parts of the sector maybe struggling to get their bearings. And so hoping to share some of the good stuff that we're seeing and calling out some of the things that we think could be better through the course of this webinar.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think that's a really good point to hit on this, that the leaders out there are having to find different ways of delivering the role they provided previously, to make sure that the business survives and can flourish once again. So Michael, as you said, we're going to be talking about facing facts today, and how businesses can come out the other side of this really terrible and tough time, in a positive way. And we were talking the other day about the business model within hospitality, and whether that's broken and needs to change, and how we can make it more sustainable moving forward. And if you could just start us off and just give us some thoughts on that, that'd be good.
Yeah, I think it is important to acknowledge that this is a moment in history that it's going to be remembered. We're going to be talking about this when we are sitting in a rocking chair somewhere, and very close to our last days, been talking about that time, the pandemic, where everything shifted. So this crisis had put countries in situations, devastated businesses, killed 100,000 people, which is a very sad situation. And it's absolutely if not, it hadn't devastated, but very closely set hospitality and restaurant out of function. It showed how narrow our margin was and how vulnerable we were as a business, and nobody could have predicted that. Not the cleverest person in the world, I'm not saying that, but it definitely made me start thinking about, wow, we are living on a knife edge. And I was talking about some of these things before that with people, that we need to change this is too difficult, it's not the right way of running business, we need to find new models, we need to find different way to make more profit in basically. So you don't have profit, you can't do good. And then I think there's another element here, that both business and people will not be the same after this event. This is fundamentally shifting our ways we're gonna be living our life, and the outcomes we actually don't know. We're in the middle of it. Nobody can say that. And wherever we say on this webinar, it's going to be our educated guess. But definitely, I think there's a consensus around the table that we need to change something. We need to do something different, because everybody, if they're really honest and looked in the mirror instead of out the window before the crisis in hospitality, they'll also look at their own models and think, it's a tight game. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm not going to know what to do when it comes to rent review. I'm not going to know what I'm going to do, because already we're struggling. But again, it's all about behavioral change, isn't it? The consumer, everybody has talked about, have changed behaviors, and thereby the way they eat, the way they consume, the way they travel, everything is changing. And thereby the way we operate, and the products and the services, all the experience bit has to change as well in hospitality. Definitely have to be questioning what people want. And first of all, the first step is where we are now. People have to feel safe. They need to feel that this trust can be rebuilt with hospitality again. And the trust thing is not just doing PPE and get all the signage right in your shop. It's actually getting them to understand that you are an organization that cares. And I think that's probably the most important message we have, that we can't continue just having a brand and a product. We actually need to create organizations that care. And most organization actually cares. They just forget to tell that story and actually get that edge into everything they do and communicate it both internally and externally. So I think it's an absolutely interesting time. And I think the question is now, what comes next? and how do I develop my business model? Because I think it's not just about the survival. I acknowledge that, and we all need to keep money in the bank. But there's also a question about how do I start now building a business that can, survive the pandemic, because there's no cure, there's no vaccine, so it's not going to go away. So how do we build business models that actually starts building that new market or that new interaction with hospitality is needed, brands, experiences? And I'm not saying that, of course, there'll be less competition because they're already disappearing. But I think the most important thing is not focusing on that, but actually focusing on what kind of value can I actually bring to my 7% of the market, and how can I create these fans that just loves what I do. I'm not just a product, I'm not just a transaction, I actually connect with this. And I think that's what I'm seeing that needs to happen from a business model, but also maybe from a, you call it leadership philosophy, philosophy around how we scale these businesses. And that may be a question we can come back to, Matt and Rob, but I think there's definitely a question about scaling here. We've seen the consequences of now. The pandemic just wiped out massive organizations, which you thought couldn't happen. They couldn't disappear. So how do we scale in the future? And is there a question, which I've asked a couple of times before the pandemic, can you actually get a food business to a size where it's not actually adding value anymore, both internally and external? It's actually over its capacity because the mission, the vision can carry it. Maybe food businesses can't be as big as many other businesses. Maybe there is a loft to how big a food business can be. I know McDonald's is the proof of it can be big, but it's a very different business than many restaurant businesses because it's a logistic and property business. And again, I think it's a very different product that many others are selling. So yeah, I think there's some very big questions about what kind of hospitality world are we going to design. But I think, and I believe, it's going to be businesses, and I will give the word over to Rob, that's actually care for people, their customers, their communities, and the planet. And that's what's going to be the core of their business. And on the back end of that, they're going to make some massive profit. I'm no doubt about that.
Definitely. I think the point you make there about the people in the organization is key. And I think what people have realized more recently is this relationship they have with the business as a customer, as an employee, but then the business needs to understand their relationships with those different elements as well. What do you think, Rob? Any thoughts to add to?
I mean, it's really interesting. I think a couple of observations. First thing is to say, I actually sought Michael's advice fairly early on in the Yapster journey. And the reason is because we're a secure and inclusive messaging platform, but we are, of course, a messaging platform. The most important thing about a messaging platform is the quality and the clarity of the messages flowing through it, right? Like the thing that gives us sort of a pipe significance is what is that pipe transmitting? And one of the challenges we observed in the early days of Yapster's journey was that we'd have organizations would license our software because they knew they needed to engage people and they assumed they had a story to tell. And then it wasn't completely clear to me that there was, in fact, a powerful, compelling story to tell. And therefore, I sort of saw this slight underutilization of the product. And that's thankfully transformed since. But one of my questions to Michael was, everybody's talking about engagement. Everybody's talking about operational transformation. I'm not totally seeing it yet. Is that a problem in my platform that I need to fix through technology maturity? Or is it a problem in the leadership community and the operating community? Or is it a little bit of both? And Michael, again, I would toss that back over to you to opine on that in terms of what you've seen changes in the market and whether that change has been sort of crystallized and accelerated by the pandemic. Adding on to Michael's point about if we want to get in and talk about what is the realistic potential of different types of businesses vis-a-vis sort of scale and operations, I think one of the things that we're seeing in our customer base and the new customers that are coming into Yapster is we're seeing this sort of split, this divergence between businesses that are concluding that they're effectively entertainment versus businesses that are effectively essential services. So of course, if you're an essential service, then sort of repeatability and being affordable for lots and lots of transactions through a customer's lifetime is essential. If you're entertainment, then you clearly need to dazzle a customer and provide fair value, but not necessarily a low price. And Michael, as you were talking, I was thinking about Hollywood movies.
Yeah.
And of course, you do have blockbuster movies, but there's a point after which all of the movie-going public have seen a movie. And then there's residual value from people that want to see Back to the Future for the 50th time, or show the remake to their kids, Karate Kid or whatever. But actually that product has a sort of natural point at which it tops out, because the entertainment value is sort of defined by the novelty. And so I think at the moment, and there'll be lots of other strategic decisions that organizations need to make now that's been sort of brought on by this compelling event of the pandemic. But that seems to be one of the big ones. All of these brands that haven't decided yet whether they're an essential service or an entertainment are now really having to do so, because it goes to strategy, it goes to price, it goes to optimal scale, it goes to how you internally and externally communicate. So it is a fascinating time to be in the industry.
Definitely. And I think, so would you be saying to people right now, if you're talking to business owners, that that's the message you need to start getting out to your customers, that actually we are essential for you, whether you believe it or not? You know, this is my product, here's how it's changing, this is what I'm doing differently.
So I'll just jump in quickly, and then I know Michael's actually got, frankly, more interesting thoughts than me on this. I think in a way, like what we've jumped to the sexy end of the analysis, the sort of the tip of the iceberg, right? Like the bits you can see. My suggestion would be, and of course, Matt, entirely up to you how you want to use the time on the webinar, but what's fascinating is looking at the concepts and the structure that sits below the tip of the iceberg, sort of under the water. When I've worked with Michael previously, a lot of what we talked about is just trying to get into, as we bring a new customer on, seeing if we can understand their place in the market, their strategy, the role that technology plays. And then eventually you build up and you'll then have hopefully meaningful, credible opinions on the bits that the customer can see and that they most enjoy talking about at conferences and the like. Michael, do you still have your sort of Mavericks framework where you'll typically go in and effectively audit an operation to see how clear the leadership team are on what they are and how they do it?
So when we normally engage with people, we do like an organizational audit to we call it the Maverick audit. But what we look at is all the elements of a business, and a business has about 16 areas in general when it comes to a hospitality business. And the first thing we look at is, of course, leadership and culture. Because if that is broken, it doesn't matter how great tools I put into the people journey or the operation journey or what technology Rob comes with or you come with, Matt. It doesn't matter. It will break, because it starts with, of course, team leadership or leadership. So what kind of level are the leaders on? But what I think is very what I've seen, pre-pandemic, and I don't know if that's probably not changing, is often when you come in, there is some company values. And often if you asked, let's say we had all hospitality CEOs on this webinar, and I asked them and I showed some values behind me, they would not recognize which one were theirs, or they would think that were their value, because it's actually not lived into the culture. And that's the first step we often take with them. And we call it that, define your difference. And it's not a marketing activity. That's, of course, skills for marketing, but it's actually finding that shared banner the team or the organization walk around. Define what your purpose is. That's a misused word. But why are you here? What direction you're doing? Is everybody actually understanding that? Has that been communicated out to the frontline employee? And I think that's where, people do these kind of workshops, but they forget to implement it. And when you haven't implemented that, it comes a bit back to, I think that's what Rob is circling a bit around, is that it becomes very difficult for your people to act according to what kind of experience you want to sell. Because most businesses out there would be what Rob calls an entertainment business. There will be people that is transactional and have the price, and then it's very transactional and fast, and we all know who that is. And they do that well, and they live it to the extreme. But then there's all the one where you actually have to sell an engagement, entertainment. And I think one of the biggest problem is that people really don't understand what kind of behaviors and beliefs and expectation there is from them in the company. What is the company shared expectation, behaviors, and beliefs you need to live every day? And it sounds more complicated and more fluffy than it is, but it's actually hardcore business, because the businesses we've been involved in and the business I'm involved in, besides operating consultancy business, like a little business called the Bear Kitchen, and we've done this, it means that we're much more hands-off as leaders because people know how they expect you to behave. And then it's about getting consistencies across these behaviors. And then you start building this Patagonia kind of like culture, because Patagonia didn't just come up with a clever project, product and marketing. It's actually their culture they're selling. And then they're telling stories around that. And I think that's where we need to start out, because a lot of organizations have these stories. We don't need to save the world, all of us. We don't need to stop overfishing in the ocean. We don't need to stop hunger. It doesn't have to be these big statements, but it can be the small things you do in a community or what you do for your people inside your organization. You just need to find those behaviors and live them every day. And I think that's where culture comes in. And I think because we were driven by profit, which we should be driven by. No profit, we can't do good. But it became more about the P&L and the next round of investment, and became building a sustainable business that could outlast ourselves. And I think that's where hospitality turned a bit wrong. And I think we will get back to that, because we will not have a choice, because that's what the employees and the customers want from us. And again, and it comes back to what Rob talked about, communication again. One thing is doing that, then it comes down to the leadership's ability to be able to communicate that and build that relationship through the organization, because that's what we do with communication. We build relationships. So a long and winded answer to it, but yes, we do these audits, and the biggest missing link and gap we see is often there is no overall banner to march under as a team. It's just random things, or a strategy document only the exec team have ever talked about or did at a workshop on an away day. So that's what I normally would see in many businesses. Not all of them. Some of them is also great. There's some great operators, like I think Honest Burger. We all know them. They are very good at telling that story of what they're about and what they do well and why people love to work there. So that's a great example of somebody that's getting it right, in my view.
I've got another good example, Michael, if Matt's interested. With it's in the bar sort of subsector, Inception Group. So they're a Yapster organization, and my favorite example of what they did about understanding their mission and also understanding where to invest and where to cut in hard times is, did either of you guys see the news that as it became clear that there'd be a need for sort of some type of mandatory PPE in various parts of the consumer sector, Inception Group started looking into whether they could use like wartime gas masks in cahoots, their sort of 40s speakeasy format, and they were using like beekeepers' outfits in the botanical gardens, or one of the brands, and they put Victorian mannequins on the seats in their Mr. Fogg's chain. And the idea was, like, the point is, in each case, that type of PPE is more expensive than latex blue gloves, right? So it's an investment in a time of general retrenchment. So like they've, I'm sure, had to make very hard decisions positively affecting the P&L to reset their business in the environment where falling revenues are affecting them as it is everyone. But what's really clear is the reason they did that is they understand that their mission is to create unique experiences, right? They are very much out and out on the entertainment end of the spectrum. And they know that you would come back to an Inception Group location if you've got a special occasion. You're seeking novelty, and everything they do drives at, or is intended to drive at, giving these wonderful, unique experiences. And so they know, as a leadership team, try not to cut things that undermine the novelty of what you're doing. But then what's really interesting from a communication and a strategic perspective is that then is able to cascade all the way through the organization. So of course, you know, as you say, Michael, culture is what you do, not what you just put on the poster in the wall. Yeah. And so all of those micro decisions that are being made in real time, day to day across the organization are more likely than not to be in keeping with that overarching mission, because it's really clear what the mission is, how that then affects operational decisions, how that affects prioritization and budgeting. And then sort of technology and other like minor operational things sort of sit underneath that, in that sort of pyramid, that hierarchy of importance. And it is pretty cool. I mean, and you don't mind it as a technology company, because the worst customer you can have is one that thinks that you alone are going to transform their organization, what you want is they've got a clear vision for transformation, and they know that your piece of technology is a critical component of that. And Matt, it'd be really really interesting to you, having been both sides of the fence, to sort of know what the great power of technology is and where it's actually a limitation, and organizations that are hoping, any sort of tool on its own is going to transform their fate, as probably wishful thinking.
Yeah, definitely. I think sometimes that can be the initial thought, though, isn't it? That, I'm going to bring something in and it's by itself, it's going to fix the problem. But you're right, there has to be the ultimate purpose of that bit of tech, and it has to fit in with the culture and the thought process of what's happening and why we're using it. Often we talk to customers about managing their operations and doing it in a more efficient manner, and that's what we're there to help them do. But the tech won't do that alone. You're right, there's people involved in that, and again, the communication, the message of what this product is there for, or what this tech is there for, needs to be right along the line to make sure the actions are correct from those people that are delivering them on site every day. And then also, you talk about leaders, but it's not just the leaders at the top, it's the leaders as you come down through the business, and the messages need to be consistent from those people out to their teams as well. And that goes back to the use of tech and how it's managed as well. I think it's great that the concept of having to make those environments more engaging as well now, where people have really done that and adapted. They're obviously having smaller capacity in their businesses, so they've got to make more of what's in there and the people that come into their businesses. And that kind of moves on to the next point we wanted to talk about, which was the consumer behaviors as well. We're seeing people working from home far more often, so obviously the behavior of people is changing in terms of where they are and when they're spending their money and how they're spending their money. But how do you see businesses have reacted? Do you think on a whole, businesses have reacted well to that change in behavior? Have they pivoted themselves? And are you seeing those pivots becoming something more sustainable and something that's part of their business model moving forward, or is it something they'll let go of?
I think let's just take a real life example. So I talked with Paul Hooker from Boston Tea Party, the ops director, and they're regional, and they turned on back. Yeah, that's now about 4 weeks ago, starting to click and collect and delivery, and they have some heavy fans because they are an organization that really cares about people, planet, and the communities. And then they had some very clear principles. They both communicated to their staff, but also to their customer. How are we going to make decisions, as Rob said, in this difficult journey? And they found out what they already had. It was that they had a principle of make things better. So they just went back and looked at their values and their principles and start making decisions for that. And that meant that they didn't take away the reusable cup. That's a great example. They actually kept on saying that we're not going to give you a paper cup, even though we have found a way to serve you coffee that way. And in that way, they've been very creative about actually creating a story around that and sharing that locally. Maybe it hasn't been seen that much in London, because I started looking at, because I had to interview Paul, and it's interesting to see how they picked up their sales. They're not at 100%, but they probably around the 60, 70%. I haven't checked in with him for a couple of weeks, but it's interesting to see that when you have local fans and what happens locally when you bring your business back, that they haven't made discounts or done anything on the prices. They just open their doors again because people need a bit of their Boston Tea Party fix. It's just interesting. And then I think there's been a lot of innovation happening, and that's if there's a positive. I've never seen things change as fast. If they can keep on changing that fast, hospitality will be a very good place in a couple of years. We will have been redefining this industry. But home deliveries, I one business I know really well locally to me, they went from 1 week to the other doing home delivery. Now they have survived just doing that and a bit better. They're performing better than they did having restaurants. They're now closing restaurants because they're just bad business, and they're going to focus on developing the home market. And that's a small operator. That's not a big operator. They are a 4-unit operator. So it's just interesting to see that, thinking out of the box or being forced to think out of the box actually have been. And then I think the last thing I thought when we talk about engagement is that the really savvy operator I've seen and talked with have been very good from the outset to get their staff involved in solving these problems. It has not been just the leadership team solving problems. They have understood that the solutions is not in the boardroom. They are actually out there. So we going to engage more with them. They maybe implemented technologies like Yapster. They maybe started having actually more productive team meetings. And I can say that for myself. Funny enough, when we didn't have to meet up, we have much more productive team meetings because you just want to optimize time on a screen. And you can't do all those things, run for coffee or be late. You just have to be there. So it's interesting to see that, the engagement of teams and the really good operators, how they actually have leveraged that. And I think they're going to have, people that's going to want to stay with them afterwards. Because again, I think there's a lot of questions about if people want to return to hospitality as well. That's a reality right now. There's maybe no jobs, but there's also a reality that many of our beloved people that works in the industry have gone home. So that doesn't mean the UK, that may mean Spain, other places, Italy. Are they going to come back? Life has changed, so as an operator, we really need to understand again, how we bring not only customers, but employees back again. So I don't think, of course, price is always interesting, but to answer your question, I don't think price is going to be more important. I think we saw that. I think it was you, Rob, that mentioned it from time ago, that actually, and you can elaborate a bit on that, but we didn't really see a change in people's behavior going for price only. So when they had to treat themselves, they really they want to go out and have the big show, and they're willing to pay for that if you deliver, of course.
Yeah, so there's data for decades of recessions that shows that in recessions, affordable luxuries tend to go up. So most famously, I think it was a Harvard Business School case study on lipstick sales in a recession decades ago. But that's held. And Matt, I think you've said that things like cappuccino sales have tended to go up in the last couple of recessions for the same reason. So it's actually, whilst when economies are genuinely retrenching, it is true that customers become more price sensitive broadly, but there's certain categories where they actually become less price sensitive. And so you've got to really tune into understanding what the customer wants in the category that you're occupying. And in most cases, other than maybe some Michelin star restaurants, like a dining experience or a drink experience or a sort of coffee experience is broadly in the affordable luxury category. And Michael, I think because when we started talking about that, actually the other piece of research I found fascinating, and I think we circulated something on LinkedIn about it, was that in the 2008 recession, organizations that had risen to sort of their original success on the basis of a differentiated proposition, i.e. not a cost leadership position, that tried to pivot into becoming a cost leader, i.e. trying to out discount brands that always had discounting in their DNA, were materially more likely to fail as an organization than organizations that still cut costs where they could, but actually leaned into their existing point of differentiation. So that's not to say that leaning into an existing point of differentiation is easy or protects you from the risk of failure. It's saying on a balance of probabilities basis, if you're not a discount brand, trying to lunge into being a discounter is usually, the data says, not the right thing to do. And Matt, interestingly, to answer your original question from my perspective, in the technology world, we talk a lot about something called product market fit. It's this idea that you start building a software product and you grow modestly to begin with as people sort of buy into your vision and give you a chance when the product's quite nascent. And as the product and or the market matures, you reach a thing that venture investors call product market fit, which is where the market starts actually pulling the product out of you, like your sales accelerate faster than you can really explain. And that's because you found this thing called product market fit. And it's a very common phenomenon in the technology world. But I think in the food service world or the leisure sector more broadly, where there have been quite a lot of scale operations for a number of years now, I suspect that quite a lot of the current crop of executives have either never experienced or have forgotten what it feels like to go through that race to find product market fit cycle. And that is a bit of a learned skill. It's sort of like it's taking calculated bets based on the data, not what you wish the world to be, but what your actual results are telling you it is. And keep iterating until such time as the relevant numbers start changing in a positive way at a pace that you can't totally explain. Matt, I know you work with customers like all the way across the sort of size and sectoral spectrum. But a lot of the coolest sort of high growth brands that I know that we work in common with will often sort of seek Bizimply out. And I just wondered if you'd sort of seen that when you look at the stratas of your customers by size, if you were seeing that the more entrepreneurial ones, just in terms of the stage of their life cycle, were finding it easier to adjust to this new reality that means that their prior success might be invalidated and they now need to go through the process of finding product market fit again. Don't know if that's a trend.
Yeah, I think so. I think one thing is obviously it's easier for those smaller businesses to adapt and to change more quickly. You know, if they've got to change something at the front end or in how they're serving or how they're delivering their product. Clearly, when you're a smaller business, that's quicker and easier because you've maybe only got 2 or 3 locations, and when you're at scale, that can become far more costly and more of a challenge. But yeah, I think, you know, the businesses that I've seen around me, I live in Southampton, and I'm a big craft beer fan, and you know, a lot of the breweries, a lot of the tap rooms, the ones that reacted quickly and have started delivering different things in different ways, have done really well out of it. One customer comes to mind, Dirty Sick, who are a customer in common with yourself. So they're a barbecue restaurant out in Surrey, and you know, they've got quite big car parks. So during the lockdown, they were doing collections. You drive in, open your boot up, and the food gets put in the back. And chatting to Bjorn the other week, he's saying that since they've reopened, actually the sales are better than what they were last year. And it's because those 2 models are working still together. Some people aren't yet ready to come and eat in the location. Some people want to stay at home. So he's still being able to service both of those markets. So yeah, I think where companies have been able to pivot and they're going to be able to maintain it, I think that's where you'll see, you know, a fair amount of success and you know, continued growth. And Michael, I was listening to one of your podcasts last week, actually, with your man from the Athenian, and he was talking about exactly that. And I think one of the things I found really interesting was when he was talking about, you know, being honest with the customers about the product and the price as well. So he was talking about a can of Coke. You know, customers know how much a can of Coke costs, and you know, they on Deliveroo, on an app, they can go through and see all the different businesses, and you know, if you wanted to, you could really cross-reference who's charging what. But even from a sitting in point of view, you know, we've got to start charging and you know, treating our customers fairly. And I think that's an interesting point, is that he seems to be doing well out of the market that they've delivered and the new locations and the way they've been trading as well. What do you think about that?
I think I was thinking exactly on that interview before when you went down the line. And what I think is interesting, Matt, is that it's a bit like we forgot that, you know, even pre this pandemic, we were starting to get what I call savvy consumers. They can figure it out. They know it's you for real if you care. And I think people will remember, you will, and we all can remember that some organizations within or without hospitality, they had done some incredible times. They will be remembered 20 years from now. There'll be stories about they went in, helped the NSS, or they helped the homeless, or whatever they did in this period. And that will be remembered because they cared about something bigger than that. And I know I'll keep on coming back to that. And I think that will again, and then they, you know, besides that, they were incredible at launching new revenue streams. And you know that, both of you, from a tech product point of view, if the product doesn't get the revenue, you need to pivot. You need to find new ways of putting your product out there. And I think it's been a bit, we haven't been forced to in the industry maybe, but now it's so interesting to see that, you know, before people had one revenue stream, maybe have 3 now. And now they need to go and find that balance, because, you know, what takes off in a pandemic doesn't mean you sell in normal or new normal times where people can go back in and dine. But I think it's going to be, you know, you will see people selling saucers, you will see home kits, and we see some will have massive success still with home kits and other will not. There will be new market entrants, you know. Think about the plant-based space where you have like all plants, and you have restaurants now trying to penetrate that. You have all your veg boxes. You have Leon going national with something. They just paused now to come back again, so they probably learned something, and now they're gonna re-attack the market. And it's interesting to see Leon has become this digital retailer instead of high street brand. They don't even talk about that anymore. So it's incredible to see that pivoting going on, but also the honesty you need to have with the consumers, because they know, as you say, you can't just hide these things anymore. And then you need to find, one thing is, of course, you have to charge what you need to make money. but also you need to develop some products you can charge the prices for. You have to have a really good product when it comes out on the other side, I think. So I think it's super interesting. I agree with you, Matt. There's going to be a whole lot of innovation going on still, and that's what we need to take the sector. And I think technology is going to have a massive role in automating, the repeatless monotone task managers are doing. And you'll see layers of management disappears because you can't afford having these massive structures, and you need to put power out to the individual restaurants if you're a big operation, and you can't afford to have big head office costs and so on. And there's going to be some interesting ways to see how they just not only the business model and the pivoting to the consumer, how you're pivoting your way you operate your organization, and still being able to maintain an operation with high consistency.
I think that's actually one of the things I'm seeing is that's actually the hardest thing. It seems to me that like if you bring in capable technologies, say Bizimply, to help you understand your people situation and making sure you're getting the right people in the right place at the right time and cost. Obviously, Yapster helping communicate across an organization to streamline operational workflows that otherwise have got so much friction in them that they're twice the cost they should be. All of that stuff, I think, is fairly clear. Like it's not easy to implement and drive operational transformation if you've never done it before, but there are a lot of executives that have done it before. Where they haven't, you can bring in a specialist like Michael, like you and your team. Like I think the thing that's hard now is having made those savings, even if organizations wouldn't have had the courage to do it pre-pandemic, kind of the pandemic is forcing people to make the operational savings. And it seems to me the big challenge is now there's a huge temptation to try and be a discount-led offer because you deep down in your heart don't feel comfortable trying to capture a premium price because you don't really know what you could do that is worth it. And that failure of imagination is scary for some and is an amazing opportunity for others, because if you can combine operational transformation, intelligent use of technology to take out unnecessary cost, and then have the imagination to reinvest some of those savings into the non-tech bit of it, where's the magic? That is a spectacular opportunity. I sadly don't know where the greatest opportunities are in that sense, but I'm excited about sort of making our contribution on the operational transformation side, and then providing a vehicle so that those visionaries that do unlock the new winning propositions for the post-COVID customer can do their thing, right? But that does seem I don't know if you guys are seeing that. Like it does benefit us as technology companies because we naturally drive savings through automation and efficiency. But everybody at the moment seems to be lunging towards the cost saving side of the equation without thinking about the reinvestment in value adding activities.
Yeah, I think that's the natural reaction, isn't it? It's Michael, you mentioned about surviving. It's how are we going to survive? If money's tight at home, what do? You look at where you're spending money, and that's obviously going to be the first place to do it. But you're right. I think it's where can we save money, but where can I invest money? If we're talking about your house, it's putting some insulation in the roof or something to save on your heating bills. It's exactly the same in the business. Like, where can I invest something that's going to then deliver more value or more money? And I think you're right. I think putting that back into the products, putting that back into how you're delivering the products as well, especially for those guys who have pivoted into the delivery and the collection. One of the biggest challenges in that space is how do I make sure my product gets from here to the customer tasting just as good as it would going from the kitchen to the table? That's not an easy challenge, and obviously there's plenty of businesses out there that have overcome that massively, and with Deliveroo and Uber Eats expanding so rapidly, clearly that's had to advance quite quickly as well, I think. But Michael, you're right. I think you mentioned some of the kind of make at home, eat at home kits as well. I think those have been pretty successful because it goes back to Rob's point of entertainment. You're linking those two things together. There's the quality of the product, but then you've got your own entertainment factor because you're going to try and make it yourself in the kitchen. Whether that goes off well or not, that's down to the individual. But I think those are really interesting ways of doing that as well. I was just going to ask a point on the pricing side of things and the VAT breaks and the cuts for the businesses. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think businesses should be delivering those back to the customers? Do you think that they should be utilizing that in what Rob just mentioned there in terms of taking those savings and delivering it back into the business?
So this is a Marmite question, of course, but I'm going to take the position that the industry needs every pound they can to reinvest in creating the new industry. So I actually don't think it's go back to the consumer, because actually there's never been more money floating in society than does now. I know there's people that's harming, and they are getting, there's the voucher scheme coming. And I know some of the big ones went out to do that, but they would have done it. They are cost drivers. They drive costs, as Rob said. That's what they do, scale. It's the Walmart model. You are a cost driver. And I think they would have done it anyway. They just did it behind the VAT thing. And I think these money, as Rob just said yourself, need to be reinvested into these organizations so there's a life and jobs beyond this. And they need that money, every penny. It's absolutely scary. And when a lot of my friends have never really put their head around what actually a restaurant does on the bottom line. But you're happy with having 2% before the pandemic. That's great result. Majority of restaurant organizations were in dire minus before this. And many people think they are earning a lot of money, but they're in and out of administration all the time, as I say. That means you have no money and you don't have much, rival rooms. I think it's very important to think about this money. Of course, it didn't spend it in the right way. That's always a question, but I don't think it's something that has to go back. It was to save the industry. It was not to give cheaper prices. And cheaper prices is the death spiral, and keep on discounting, as Rob said before as well. Discounting is the devil's route to failure. It's a death spiral for any organization. I've seen it time on time, and we've seen it again and again. And I'm a bit, I think we need the eat out scheme, but I'm also a bit nervous about the expectation that will set with the consumer. But let's reality show the real facts of this. But you can almost set an expectation. A month is almost enough to set the expectation that I can eat at 50% every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Then some operators have been very clever about making fan clubs that you need to get part of this fan club, and then this fan club will continue after the voucher scheme, which is clever. I think that's clever on low operations days anyway. But I'm never been a big fan of discounting, because I believe that you can only do that when you're a customer, and not many organizations are a cost driver when they with food.
Couldn't agree more with that.
It has consequences.
Yeah, it's so true. So we work with a lot of really large organizations, because clearly at the biggest scale, WhatsApp fundamentally doesn't work, is risky for lots of reasons, work-life balance, data privacy, whatever. And we love working, and we're grateful to work for large organizations. A sort of personal passion project is helping exciting entrepreneurial brands look after their families for having taken risks and setting up the super brands of the future, and for creating jobs and building businesses at that sort of a handful of sites or even a single site. And for those organizations, I understand, started Yapster, I kind of know the some elements of the entrepreneurial journey. And I know when you're driven by passion, in the early days in particular, or in a time of crisis, the temptation to work for nothing, the temptation to work for negative returns is extreme, because you're confusing passion with profit. And Mike, I might be ripping off one of your lines, but it is seriously tempting. And I find that really alarming to some extent, because you can see it's almost like they teach lifeguards almost to stop drowning people, dragging them down too, because in the sort of in the panic they start sort of waving arms around, and it actually makes them harder to save. And you can see entrepreneurial people sort of figuratively doing that, trying to find their lifeline in the businesses and chasing discounting, going for the marginal customer rather than building a rock solid proposition for the right customer, even if that's fewer customers paying more money, is actually really dangerous. And I'm not just saying it because it's an easy soundbite on a webinar. It's actually dangerous for entrepreneurial people in operational businesses. And just on a human level, it's hard to watch. It will be the right thing for a subset of operators. So I hope I don't sound too preachy. But for a decent number of operators, it will cause personal hardship, and so it's something that I would just beg entrepreneurs to operator entrepreneurs, cut costs, intelligent use of technology, all that stuff, then take a breath, think about what either does make you special or could make you special, and then like, please God, like lean into that. And then, you know, with luck and hard work and some inspiration, you'll pull out of this and emerge as a winner post-COVID. Sorry, that was a bit intense, but it's something I feel really strongly about. And I know you do too, right, Michael?
Yeah, I think it's spot on, Rob, because there's so many. I think it doesn't matter if it's restaurant or any industry. When you're there and you love what you're doing, you sometimes you put your own livelihood the risk. And if the founders or the more people disappear because they have starved themselves to death, it can have even bigger consequences for jobs and so on. So I agree, and I think we have to go away from one of the biggest learning, working 100 hours a week for no profit. And why are we keeping all these businesses alive? We can't make them profitable. Then there's something really radical wrong, and we have to work like that. And I think that needs to stop because it's destroying. And then we have a mental health crisis just waiting around the corner, not just national, but I think that industry, we're going to see, really bad things happening. And we did a poll during the last couple of weeks on what people want to talk about. It's mental health and how do I keep myself strong in all this. And I think it starts with the individual, and we need these entrepreneurial organizations to reinvent the sector in a way. We need everyone to think innovative, but if we squeeze the penny so much we can't live. And I think it's spot on when you're saying, Rob, and the last thing I'm going to say about this is that you say it's to really want to pay for your service and have less of them that actually buy a hybrid sale from you.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think that it's those people who care about your business who will come back time and time again without thinking about it, and they'll do it for the right reasons as well. I think how would you advise people to get that message to their customers? It's their responsibility to make sure I'm here tomorrow as much as it is the businesses. The customers have a really big part to play in that. So how would you get that message across to the guys, Rob? I guess that's maybe for you to start with.
So clarity of mission, clarity of purpose. Make sure you've got the right people on the bus, because communication is critical. But we did a webinar with a guy called Scotty Mills that was did leadership development and training for 6,000 more Royal Marines, sort of coach Gareth Southgate's England World Cup team. Amazing guy. And maybe we can put this in the webinar notes or find some way of circulating it after this. But Scotty did a session with us around operational excellence and communication under pressure, but he was at pains to say none of these techniques will work with the wrong people on the bus. Right? So first thing is clarity of mission. Second thing is right people on the bus. And then after that, you need inclusive, effective communication technologies. Other platforms are available as well as Yapster, but you need to be able to then tell that story to your people, so that your people then, in addition to your window dressing and your print literature and your other marketing channels, can reinforce that message to customers. I mean, you mentioned the point earlier about how do you mark up Coca-Cola when it's a commodity? It's a great brand, but it's a commodity product from a reseller perspective. Well, what about all these funky handmade, either in-house or locally procured lemonades that people are selling now for premium markups? Right? There's loads of stuff you can do. You mentioned craft beer earlier. It's higher priced, but it's got a novel taste. It's got a novel story. So again, you can capture more value. So there's lots and lots of things you can do if you can be clear on what your options are, and then authentically tell that story to the right people. Again, I'm at risk in sounding a bit preachy again, but I actually think it's pretty straightforward, but only if you can get clear in your mind what your strategy is and then what your story is. And then it's just having the discipline to communicate it and execute it. That's discipline, right? Like anything else in life that's hard once you've got a clear plan.
Yeah, definitely. I think you hit the nail on the head there. I could probably tell you the ethos of my local brewery as well as they could, because it's just everything they do and talk about, and you live and breathe it as a customer when you go in there as well. We've had a question come in, and it's something we kind of talked about the other day as well when we're talking about cost and price with regards to the relationship with the landlord as well. So obviously landlords are a huge part of that process and of the hospitality industry. How can they help, or how can we get them to make things more attractive, and how can we get that balance better? How can we address that, do you think?
Yeah, I think it's quite simple. It's also acknowledge the customer. If you're a landlord, you have a customer, and that's restaurants, for example, and they are in a very difficult situation. They don't have the money they had when you signed the contract. Brilliant to see that the Crown Estate, the Queen's property portfolio went out the other day or last week saying that they're going to do turnover rent, because that's definitely a lifeline. I think that's where we're going to go. Why sign up to a property for 20 years? That's wild in my world. I wouldn't sign up that in any of the things I'm involved in. And we are practical right now negotiating a lease where we talk about, the only thing we talk about is turnover rent and how often should it be renewed, monthly, quarterly, 6 months, because everybody's in the same boat and come from the same perspective that we need to we need to make sure we can stop this if it's not working, because it doesn't matter. You can't pull the hair of a bald man. And I think the reality is that, it would be great to be able to pay the landlord. You should pay your bills. There's no doubt about that. But the reality is just, it's so out of control that we need, a way. And then I know there's a reality that's called mortgages and loan and so on. I'm not saying it's an easy question, but I think the Crown Estate is leading the solution when it comes to a way to find a way to survival. But yeah, let's see. It's a tough game, I think, because everybody has so different leases as well. That's not like one lease that looks similar, and every landlord have different philosophies about their portfolio, and they have different commitments. So I totally understand that and I appreciate that. But I think it'd be interesting if you can, as a landlord, go down the route of revenue-based rent. I think you will have customers survive out on the other side and will be good faith to you to years to come, because the high street is going to be hard as we go forward.
I agree with that, and actually I would add to it. Again, it's about having a business plan and being disciplined about sticking to it. One of the things I'd recommend anybody to do in the sector is Google Loungers IPO prospectus. Read the Loungers IPO prospectus. It'll detail all the risks in the Loungers business. It'll detail their sort of operating model, including high-level financials. One of the things you'll see in the Loungers IPO, the prospectus, which is one of the reasons it was a successful IPO, of course, had difficulties like everybody has that's a public stock, particularly in the consumer sector. But they talked about being very clear in their mind what the rent they're willing to take on is as a percentage of their expected sales. So if you're disciplined, you actually can effectively set turnover-based rents, even if the landlord isn't willing to. It's different if you're already trapped in an unsustainable rent. And I think the things that Michael suggested are absolutely right. Where you're looking at expanding or looking at how you thrive after this crisis, it seems to me, albeit as an ex-lawyer turned tech geek, not as an operator. So I know I don't speak with quite the same authority, but being an ex-corporate lawyer, I do like IPO prospectuses and what they can tell you about market norms. You actually can impose your turnover-based will on the market, at least as it relates to new opportunities. The question is, do you lose your discipline in the pursuit of growth if the market comes back and saddle yourself with uneconomic operating costs because you didn't fully think through your business model, or did and then lacked the discipline to stick to it? And that's something that each business owner or leadership team needs to decide and then succeed or fail on the quality of their decisions. But well worth reading the Loungers IPO if you're interested in what's a sensible property ratio to expected revenue.
Great little tip there, and especially for people out there who are looking for something, those small margins. There's going to be something in there that you'll pick out and will help you. I think we've pretty much come to the end of our time, so I don't want to take up too much more of Michael and Rob's day. They're busy guys, and we've answered the question that we had in. We didn't have any others, and there was a few that I had already prepped, so I think we pretty much covered those. Guys, I just want to thank you so much for your time again. And we'll try and get some links to those things that we've mentioned there in the blog or the post that we put out with this as well. Yeah, if you do want to listen to this again, you can, as we've recorded it. Please share it with friends, colleagues, if you think there's some information in there that I think would be useful to them. Hopefully there's some insights in there that would be appropriate and something that you know people could do something with. So, gents, thanks very much for your time. It's very insightful. I'm sure we'll catch up soon.
Thank you, Matt.
Yeah, absolute pleasure. See you again.
Thank you so much for organizing this panel, Bizimply. And also thank you to you, Matt, and Rob, for being so switched on and sharing your great insights and understanding about where you see the industry. And I'm sure that people will go away here with some deep reflections about how they will develop and operate their businesses going forward. And there's no doubt about the 4 learnings here. What? Set a clear direction, use your purpose and storytelling, get the right team in place, the right people on the bus, the wrong people off the bus, build and create a culture, and use technology to make these 3 things happen faster and more connected. So please share this episode with anyone else you think they will benefit from it. Rate it, like it, and let us know what you think. And if you want to get more of these kind of conversations and also maybe leadership tools you can use in changing your business, you should go to hospitalitymavericks.com and sign up to our newsletter or download our free tools. Thanks for listening, and be Maverick.